So I got to thinking to myself after reading, more Democratic hate in my comment section, and I thought they all can't be like this. They just can't. And then it hit me. Oh, but they are. And there's a reason for that, and we're going to go over that today. And it's not so much their fault as the government's. So we're going to use a few key terms today. Project Mockingbird, Smith-Muntz Monetarization Act of 2012, which was Obama. Let's boil down those three terms. Project Mockingbird is the mass propaganda that is perpetrated to the American public. And Project Mockingbird is allowed because of the Smith-Muntz Modernization Act, where Obama came in and said, now propaganda can be perpetrated on the American people. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. What you have is a whole bunch of programmed Democrats. And the thing that gives them the ability to be programmed is neuralistic programming. And neuralistic programming is where you create neurological patterns in a person in their subconscious brain. TV does this a lot because, we just kind of tune out. So anything that is going into us is going into our subconscious brain. And then that kind of twists our reality a little bit, a lot. Neuralistic programming it affects what is called syntax, which uses language to construct the way our mind views a specific reality. Examples are the modern day public school, religion, politics. What they're doing is they're informing us, which means they're forming in our minds our reality, which is very easy to do with trigger words and trigger images. Now, how they do it is they invoke one of three things. One would be your fear of death. That's why you hear words like deadly insurrection, violent insurrection. The second one is more geared towards advertisement. It's using you being hungry to basically take your money. You deserve this. You look great. Those type of things. And then they'll put a picture of a big juicy burger in front of you. And it tells your mind, I need this. And then the third one is our need to reproduce, which is why sex sells. They use trigger words like sexy or erotic or beautiful. They use these images to induce the subconsciousness. All of these are geared towards taking your money, but some are geared towards taking your reality. Neuralistic programming can be used to shape a nation. That's where the propaganda comes in. It can be used to cause a nation to go to war. For example, let's use 9/11. They invoke the feeling that we had during 9/11 where America was being attacked. And then they use something called critical factor bypass. It's the phenomenon that if you repeat everywhere, in the media, in the government, in the politics, in your everyday talking, in the news, on social media, certain buzzwords, that repeated a message, eventually society takes over for the propagandist because they believe that. So they tell their friends and family about it. When you think about critical factor bypass, think about the invasion of Iraq. What was spread to the United States people? Weapons of mass destruction. And it was everywhere. It was in the news. Our politicians were talking about it. It was talked about at church. So the American people assumed that that was true because it was inundated on us everywhere. And then what happened when we invaded Iraq? Yeah, did we find any of those weapons of mass destruction? No, it was propaganda to turn the people to a specific side so that the government can do what the fuck they want. So together with the neuralistic programming and the critical factor bypass, it creates what is called mass formation psychosis or mass formation hypnosis. These are the people that become extremists, believing the propaganda and they are consuming it as its reality. Those are the people that scream the loudest, that fight the longest. They've seen this in Germany with Hitler and the Holocaust. They get 25% of the people to believe this mass, just psychosis of reality. And then 25% of people will control 75% of people. But did you know it only takes 5% of people to stand up and say, no, there were no weapons of mass destruction. No, that's not what it was. I am one of those 5%. So when you have this mass formation psychosis, it is easy to manipulate the reality versus what is actually the objective consciousness. And it's done through psyops, like Germany was a psyop, or this is how socialism and communism takes place. They use 3 things: information, which is information that is true; disinformation, which is entirely false information; and misinformation. Misinformation is used a lot to twist the reality of the United States. Misinformation is a combination of information, which is true, and a combination of disinformation, which is entirely false. So they use misinformation, partly true information, so that they can enact psychological warfare on you. Let's talk about collective consciousness. Collective consciousness is where people believe a lie based on a future of falseness. For example, we're going to war based on a lie would be an example. But when you think of collective consciousness, think of the world as a whole, humanity as a whole. Now, we have certain things that affect this collective consciousness. I want you guys to know 95% of your brain is subconsciousness. Only 5% is the actual consciousness, the analytic. Collective consciousness, once you make a nation believe that this lie is true, like I said before, society will continue to perpetuate the lie for you. When you get into the psychological warfare is when, 1, collective objective universe. It's the world for itself. And then you have 2, you have personal subjective universe. It's how a person believes the collective objective universe through their perception and their neuroprogramming, their personal perception of the 5 senses. A collective subjective universe is basically a bunch of people with similar personal subjective universes. And that's when you have things like the echo chamber. When you have people that don't talk to people outside of their own beliefs, those beliefs are reinforced by the people, whether or not they're actual facts or not. And this is where Trump derangement syndrome comes from. But I want you to remember that this happens on both sides of the aisle. This is not just Democrats. Republicans, conservatives, independents can fall into this same pattern of neuralistic programming if they do not constantly inform themselves of other people's realities.